It's been said, and I wholeheartedly agree, that the most expensive luxury that we have in the United States of America is ignorance. And I can't agree with that anymore. A few weeks ago, I was talking with a Marine veteran, and he told me this. He said, Diego, when people find out I was a veteran in the Marines, they come to me and they say, thank you for your service. Thank you for serving our country. And when they tell me that, I like to stop them and I say, do you really want to thank me? And they say, yeah, we really do want to say thank you. He said, no, do you really want to thank me or do you just want to say thank you? And they typically say, I really want to thank you. He said, if you really want to thank me, then here's what I want to ask. Would you do me a favor and do just as much research into looking into who you vote for as you do when you buy a used car? And that's basically all we're asking. We just want to see that people know who they're voting for. They know why they're voting for who they're voting for. And tonight we are honored and privileged to have Russ Fulcher, candidate for governor of the great state of Idaho. We have Mr. Chmelik, candidate for lieutenant governor as well. We've got my man Troupis running for attorney general of the great state of Idaho. And running for state controller, our good friend Todd Hatfield right over here. We also have a few other candidates here that before it's over with, we'll have an opportunity for you to stand up and introduce yourself. But before we go any further, we want to open up this town hall in prayer, and then we're going to get right into the meat of the matter and start asking these guys some hard questions. Sound good? So good to see you, Elizabeth. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity to gather together in your name. We pray that your Spirit would be here with us in this building. We pray, God, that you would guide us. You would guide every question, guide every answer. Help us, God, as we're seeking to do your will. We pray there would be a spirit of peace, but a spirit of courage in this place. We pray that you would give these men running for office the wisdom to make the right decisions. We pray, God, that you would give all of the voters the wisdom to vote for the right men, to rule over them, and to help guide us in legislative office. Mostly, Lord, we pray that your will would be done in our lives and in this evening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So this is going to be the format for tonight. My name, by the way, is Diego Rodriguez. We're hosting this event here tonight, this town hall event, and hopefully this type of event is something that will go on more often than not. But I've got a series of questions I'm going to ask these gentlemen. They've got this microphone right here they're going to be sharing and responding to the questions that we're asking. I'll give it to you right now. First, we're going to have each of them do is just give a very quick 5-minute introduction to who they are. 5 minutes, guys, or less. 3 to 5. And here's why. The basic common stuff that we hear guys say all the time, you can see that on their website. Every single one of them, it's in their literature, it's on their website. I want to get to the meat of the matter, get to some of the issues that really, really matter, that often is missed in the literature, on the websites, in the talking points. I want you guys to be able to feel their heartbeats and know where they really stand. And full disclosure, I do support each and every single one of these gentlemen, and I will be voting for every last one of them next Tuesday in the election. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have a monolithic thinking process and we all agree about everything the same. We want it to come out, we want you guys to hear exactly what they believe on different issues. Finally, after I'm done with about 5 issues that I'm going to be addressing, we're going to open it up for this crowd to ask whatever questions you want. We have a mic runner in here. We'll take this microphone out to you so you can ask whatever questions that you want, ask it directly to them, and they'll answer it. This is being professionally recorded as well, and so whatever questions are asked and the answers, it will be captured, it will be recorded, and we will do our best to have it posted online in the next 48 hours. So if you got that killer question you want to ask, we want to make sure everybody gets that information. Sound good? That's the plan for tonight. So without any further delay, we'd like to have our good friend Russ Fulcher stand up. And before he gets started, for those who did not catch it, this morning, Congressman Raul Labrador did stand up and endorse our good friend Russ Fulcher. So Russ, give us a quick introduction to you and your campaign.
Well, thank you. In interest of full disclosure, This young man is running for state senator in District 15, and I am supporting him as well. Folks, almost just within eye shot of where we sit, less than 1 mile to the north, on the intersection of Eagle and Ustick, in the year, I believe, 1889, if my understanding family history to be correct, my great-grandfather settled on that ground, currently occupied by the Kohl's department store. And that was the dairy herd. He was a dairy farmer, and he had sheep as well. And as my mother tells me, he raised the dairy herd that was the foundational herd for what is now the Carnation Milk Company. And that transpired less than 1 mile from where we sit right now. And that's a little bit about our family roots. On the other side of my family, on my father's side, I grew up, let's see, it'd be 5 miles to the south of this road right here, on Eagle and Emily roads on a dairy farm. I'm a 4th generation dairy farm kid from Meridian. Believe it or not, we used to have dairy farms here in the 40s. Remember that? Do you not? But I realized as a young man that that model in this area was going away because it was urbanizing very quickly. So I went through the school system, graduated from Meridian High School, undergraduate Boise State, graduate Boise State, on to engineering training at a company called Micron Technology when it was very, very, very small, 1983. And spent the first 15 years of my work career with Micron. I was one of their first international people. So one of my charges was to travel around the country and travel around the world to identify economies, markets, education systems where we could proliferate our technology. And for me, that was a game-changing experience. I owe a lot to that company. We grew it dramatically in that time frame. And that was the first 15 years of a 24-year career in the technology industry, traveling around the world for that purpose. And folks, when you do that, you get an appreciation for just how special it is in the United States of America and just how wise the founders of our nation were. And just how special it is in the state of Idaho. But I will tell you that it is my opinion that in recent years, the state of Idaho has followed a path of a number of states, and we have become more and more and more subject to federal control. We are more and more and more a subsidiary of a federal government that is really overreaching. In the year 2005, I became a member of the Idaho State Senate. I just finished my 10th and last year in the Idaho State Senate. 6 of those 10 years, I was privileged to be elected by my colleagues as the Senate Majority Caucus Chairman. Now what that means basically is I'm the intermediary, or one of them, between the Senate and the governor's office. Right now it's just a tad awkward. I'm the first member of legislative leadership to challenge a governor of the same party in the history of the state. I want to tell you, this is not personal. It is not personal. It's everything to do about the issues, not the personalities. There are three reasons, 3 primary things that I'm standing on with this campaign that I would submit to you are absolutely mission critical in changing the future for our state. The first thing has to do with our healthcare system. We need to have a private free market alternative to the Obamacare exchange, folks. This is the single largest expansion of government in our lifetimes. And if we don't intervene now, fully implemented, We're not going to unwind it. We do that now. Number two, Jim Chmelik is probably one of the state leading experts on this, and so I'm not going to go too deep. I think he will, but we're in full agreement. We need to get wise, balanced access to what God gave us. It's called the lands under our feet, folks. 62% of the lands within our borders are controlled by a federal government who does not have the constitutional authority to own land. That is our wealth. That is our prosperity. That is our destiny. And folks, I'm telling you, if you take away a resource from a people, if you take away those lands, if you take away the minerals, the timber, the natural gas, the grazing, you take that away, guess what you get? You get a service-based economy with the highest percentage of minimum wage jobs in the nation. We're either one or two. We're competing with Mississippi for that title. That is unacceptable. And you know what? It gets worse. You take the 38% we have, and then you infringe on that with things called EPA regulations and restrictions, endangered species regulations, restrictions. Folks, we are the endangered species. Humans.
Totally agree.
But there's good news, because Jim Chmelik and Chris Troupis are going to tell you we can do it. There is a legal pathway to do this. It's our land. We're going to get it back. But to do it, we got to go get it. That means from a leadership standpoint, we go get it, okay? That's number two. First is healthcare, second's lands, third's education. I don't know where along the way we lost our direction with education. We are fully capable of educating our kids. Idahoans need to educate Idahoans, not somebody out of DC or California or Rhode Island or Virginia or Arkansas. The people of Idaho, the parents, the teachers of Idaho need to educate Idahoans. There is not a need to go get a standard out of Washington, D.C. to impose a similar curriculum or a same curriculum for testing standards and curriculum for Meridian versus Sandpoint versus Montessori versus Detroit versus Chicago versus L.A. Folks, we need to set that standard here. We can do that in this state. John Eynon will talk about that. Those are the three things I'm talking about. Those are the three things I'm running on. Folks, the best news is we can do it. And we have a unique opportunity this year because we have a group of people, not by design, who have stepped forward to say, it's time to change the direction of a state. And I would argue it's time to change the direction of a nation. Because if we have success in doing this, we will influence Montana, Arkansas, New Mexico, Wyoming, Utah, states that have a similar demographic. Folks, we can influence that change if we have success. We're this close. My name is Russ Fulcher. I'm running for governor.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm supposed to follow that? Diego, you made me think of something. I am a Marine Corps brat. Do we have any Marines out here, by the way? Are there any Marines in the audience? Well, I grew up in a Marine Corps family. I'm going to tell you a quick story, Diego, just maybe to think about, because I think it's applicable today to where we're at. There was a Marine named Chesty Puller. They call this guy the Marine's Marine. He's in a firefight up in North Korea. And the general calls in and says, Puller, how's it going up there? He says, sir, they're in front of me and they're behind me. They're on my left flank and they're on my right flank. I got them right where I want them. You see, guys, I know a lot of people think that it's not that great out there right now. You know, I just tend to disagree. See, Chesty Puller knew what his assets were and he knew what his liabilities were. He knew how to motivate people. He knew how people to understand what it was, that it's you that makes this work. It's the gifts and talents that come from you guys. It's not us sitting up here. All we'll do is promise to get the government out of your way. That's what you do, because you guys have the genius for great and unselfish deeds. And it's placing that trust back in your hands that will make Idaho a better state. It won't be a politician. It won't be a judge. It won't be a bureaucrat, guys. They only expand their power at the expense of us losing our freedoms. That's what happens when government gets too big. Russ hit on something that's very, very important here. It's our lands. I have championed this issue for over 12 years in this state, the last 3 years as a county commissioner. We have to have access, and not just to manage those lands have to be in the ownership of the state of Idaho if they're going to benefit Idaho. How we go about that is the case that we have made, and I got to tell you guys something. I'm so grateful that Chris Troupis has gotten in this race because he understands the legal argument. We made a case around a part of the Constitution that nobody ever really took a look at before, and you can thank a guy in Utah named Ken Ivory, a Utah state representative, who took a part of the Constitution that's called Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, which basically says if the lands that the United States are allowed to own, there's certain lands they're allowed to own. That's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. If it doesn't fit that, you have a duty to dispose of those lands. We've done such a good case of making that through what Ken Ivory's put together with an organization called the American Lands Council. That today the Federalist Society, which is a 40,000 strong organization of constitutional lawyers, say, don't take these guys for granted. They will find standing in the courts. The Michigan Environmental Law Review Team, which is no conservative group of lawyers, said these guys will find standing in the courts. Many people are now jumping on board. Through all the work that we did throughout the state, I was able to get our legislature to pass a resolution demanding transfer of public lands back to the state and put together an interim committee to study that. We was also able to take that before the Idaho Association of Counties. And this is really no easy task. If you want to see a diverse group of people who've got an opinion about anything, get a bunch of county elected officials in the same room at the one time. I was able to get over 70% of those people to pass a resolution in support of those resolutions and the committee that our state legislature put together in 2013. For that, they named me the Administrator of the Year for the Republican Party in the state of Idaho. I really think that's your award. It's not mine, because all I did was I was a messenger, and the people around the state got behind the idea. It's an idea that's long overdue. If we're going to get ourselves out of the mess we're in, we have to have our land back. And I don't know if any of you saw the Idaho Statesman. They recently endorsed the Challenger, and they likened it this way to me. They said they hoped that I could grab an oar and start paddling with the current direction when it comes to the economic climate in this state and our education. Well, let's just take a look at the economic climate we have right now in this state. Since 2007, we've added 130,000 people to the food stamp rolls, and our median income has fallen by $4,000. We're now 45th in GDP. These are not acceptable economic conditions that I want anything to do with. 36% of our budget comes from the federal government. That's $17 trillion in debt and $125 trillion in unfunded liabilities. This is not something I want to be part of, and we're failing our kids. Today, those kids, seniors graduating from public high schools in the state of Idaho and attending public colleges here in the state of Idaho, 42% have to take remedial English and 48% have to take remedial math. And they tell me I want to grab an oar and get to be part of that. I tell you what, they got one thing right. You can liken this thing to a rowboat with two guys rowing it from the current administration, and one of them is constantly having to bail it out because there's so many holes in the bottom of the boat, guys. You'll get a chance to see my turnabout tomorrow, but I would rather liken Idaho to being a jet boat. And that jet boat is being propelled by the success of each one of you in this room, okay, when you're given the opportunity to go succeed. That's what it's about. It's not about government. It's about you. It's about having our free enterprise system put back in place. And if we're going to do that, guys, we have to have our land back. And I've battled against many other things, from the healthcare exchanges to the Common Core, issues over water in the state. You can talk to my wife. By the way, which I made a huge mistake here. I should have done this right out of the gate. My wife, if anybody here has made a sacrifice, I got to tell you guys something. It's been my wife because we have 8 children. Oh, and while I'm at it, I'll introduce Russ's wife. Would you two stand up? Because if anybody's made a sacrifice, guys. Woo-hoo. We have 8 kids from 7 to 24, and my wife has been down holding the fort, and I have not been there, and I just can't thank her enough. I mean, and I love you, honey. I'll leave you guys with this. You had Ronald Reagan playing when we walked in. Ronald Reagan told us this is a wonderful time to be alive, and we're lucky not to live in pale and timid times, and we have been blessed with the opportunity to stand for something, for freedom and liberty and fairness. And these are values worth fighting for. So I encourage you all to go forth with a stout heart and a good cheer, happy warriors to take back our state and our country to freedom. My name is Jim Chmelik, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you, guys.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can I catch my breath? 4.5 hours ago, I was engaged with 42 junior high 7th and 8th graders. And here I stand in front of a wonderful crowd. I am John Eynon. I'm running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. My little introduction leads me into this statement. If you've ever worked with those junior high students, you know that they are all different. They are all uniquely gifted, and none of them are common. Well, I better take the opportunity to introduce my bride as well. Donna, stand up. 41 years together. And I can tell you one thing, she may only be 5'2", but she wears a size 12 shoe. Because I can't tell you the number of times during this campaign when I felt worn out, she administered that size 12 shoe to my derriere to get me out the door. Anyway, I have a message of hope. Everywhere we have gone in this state, and I know these gentlemen on the stage will confirm this, affirm it. We run into the best people of family and faith, believing in the principles of freedom, wanting to take back our state's sovereignty. I can't thank Diego and his family enough for the example that they set in their community. But you know what? There's people just like the Rodriguezes all over this state. Well, I'm a successful teacher. I've been recognized as a Teacher of the Year. I've spent a decade in the textbook and technology industries as a senior corporate representative and an educational consultant. And I can tell you without reservation that the prime motivation for those industries is to bring more corporate profit to their shareholders, and not necessarily the best interest of our students. I'm also a retired United States Navy commander, and I believe that today more than ever, Idaho needs a leader with the tenacity to resist top-down, agenda-driven federal mandates in education. Idaho can rise above being common by addressing 6 common sense issues. Our own state-specific standards and programs. I find it incredulous that anyone would object to Idahoans creating their own rigorous standards rather than being dependent upon a consortium where we have had very little, if any, say in the development of those standards. Secondly, we need to respect parental rights and restore local control of our schools. I can tell you this, No Child Left Behind, And then Common Core is the old 1-2 punch. Choose your poison. They're both going to kill local control of our schools. Number 3, student safety, particularly as it pertains to student data privacy. In this entire campaign, I cannot believe that my opponents do not even address this issue. The fact of the matter is, we made assurances to the federal government that we would allow them to track our children from pre-kindergarten through the workforce. But what our teachers aren't aware of is that that same tracking system is set up to track them as well. And the assurances made to the federal government in regards to our teachers is that they will be able to track their efficiency in the classroom and allow for the redistribution of teachers where they think they will be best served in our communities. That model doesn't fit in Idaho. It's set up for a Detroit or a Chicago where they are having a difficult time getting good teachers to go into the urban areas. But you know what? Some of our finest teachers in the rural areas would be delighted to have an opportunity to work in Ada County. They're standing in line to get those jobs because it's a tremendous opportunity in a great school district. Well, we also need to withdraw from the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. And the fact of the matter is now there's peer review taking place on the national level to show that this test, first of all, is inordinately long, and secondly, that it's developmentally inappropriate. We're asking kindergarten to 3rd grade to do things that they're just not developmentally ready to do. We need to also ensure that we demonstrate to our teachers that we respect them as professionals. And then finally, defend school choice and defend the right of parents to homeschool without governmental intervention. We've had outcome-based education, Goals 2000, No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, and now Common Core. And we're tired of it. You know, the cost of rolling these programs out over the next decade will be staggering. High-stakes testing, as we've just proven in this pilot test, is unfair to our students and to teachers alike. Now, who's the coup de grace? The Republican National Committee, a year ago, passed a resolution stating their opposition to Common Core, SBAC, and statewide longitudinal tracking systems. How is it that I'm the only Republican candidate who fully supports that resolution? We also believe as a party that the most effective government is the one closest to the people, and that government governs best when it governs least. Well, national tests, national standards, tracking systems, they're just more big government solutions. So I ask you, please, support Eynon for education and common sense, not Common Core. Thank you.
Chris Troupis, being the attorney, he wanted to do the closing argument, so he let me go ahead of him. My wife couldn't be here tonight. She's representing me in a forum up in Cascade, Idaho. So if I get a call, it's because she got a question and she's going to use her lifeline too. I would like to introduce Bob Forey. Bob Forey is my treasurer, and when we met a few years ago, and we both started talking about different things the land board's been doing, there's been no stopping the two of us in exposing everything that's going on to the public as much as we can. So thank you to Bob Forey. I want to tell you, out of all these guys, my race is the most difficult because nobody knows what the state controller is or what he does. We put out a press release when we announced we were going to run, and nobody printed it. You know, Russ got endorsed by Raul today, and that's all over the media. I got endorsed by Raul last week, and we put out a press release and nobody printed it. So when Diego asked me about doing a town hall for me, I said, it'd be great, but nobody will show up, so could you invite the other guys? So anyway, I am running for the Idaho State Controller. There are three big things, transparency, debt, and the land board. Transparency, we have a transparency website now for the state, but it's very limited in its capabilities. I want to make the website so transparent that anybody in this room can sit in their living room and look up their favorite department and do it, and they'd be able to do an audit of that department for efficiency and waste. Because right now, the only auditing that is done on any of our departments in Idaho is for compliance. So there's nobody's looking for waste. So the citizens will be the best auditors that we could have for the state, and we could have 1.5 million just like in just an instant. Second thing is our debt. Our governor, our lieutenant governor, and I've heard one of our congressmen, Simpson, tell you that we have a balanced budget and how great of a state we are because we don't have any debt. But the truth is, we don't have debt against the general fund, but we do have $1.4 billion of debt in this state from the separate component units. That's Garvey bonds, housing authority bonds, things like this. This is unacceptable to me that we are going to let our children pay off this debt, and we need to address this right now and get this paid back. What it is every person, including every child right now, owes the state $860. That's what it is. So you combine that with the debt on the federal level, and it's getting close to $60,000. The next thing is Idaho's Land Board. They started a practice several years ago of exchanging lands and buying businesses and commercial properties, going into direct competition with private businesses. The state doesn't pay any property taxes. That actually comes off the tax rolls in your local community, so you're obligated to make up the difference. They don't have to comply with any local planning and zoning ordinances because the state's exempt from that. So it's an unfair competition. So they own commercial office buildings, they own industrial buildings, they have vacation home rentals, they have a storage unit business, they have drawn plans to develop 2 subdivisions, one up in McCall, one over in Blaine County, and also drawn plans to build rental homes also up in the state. I can't make this up. This is all in their asset management plan too, in their direction. They want to go as far as managing berry picking, it says in that plan. What else is there? In this plan, it says we need to identify and describe our competition as they go forward buying more businesses. Folks, where's the initiative going to be in the private sector to expand your business or start something new if you have to compete with the unlimited financial resources of the state? It's just not going to be there. So anyway, I'm Todd Hatfield. I'm running for state controller. And I think our land board, I know our land board should be protecting private businesses, not going into competition with them. It's unconstitutional, it's un-American, and it's just flat wrong.
Hi, my name is Chris Troupis. I'm running for Attorney General. And before I forget, I want to introduce my wife, Maureen. We've been married 28 years, and she puts up with an awful lot. Today, she actually put up with more than the usual because I had a difficult day. While Russ was getting accolades and support, I had to go down to the City Club in downtown Boise and debate my opponent in an extremely hostile environment. There were 120 people there. I walked in, we got greeted by one person and nobody when we left. So there. I'll explain to you what my opponent stands for, and then you'll understand why. But before I get into that, I want to tell you who I am. You have to be an attorney in order to run for Attorney General, and I'm an attorney. Been an attorney for 37 years. To most people, that doesn't sound very good. So to inform you about who I am, let me tell you just a little bit about why I'm an attorney. My grandfather came over here from Greece at the turn of the century at age 12. He came alone, couldn't speak English. His family couldn't support him, so he left home, got on a boat, came to the United States. We had distant relatives in Galesburg, Illinois, and he basically moved in with them, learned English on his own, and by the time he was 21, he owned his own restaurant. That's America. That's freedom. Went back to Greece because the family back there had a wife ready for him. So he went back and he got married. He met her at the altar. And they were married 45 years, loved each other very much. My father was his eldest son. He went to college in 1941, 3 months. Then he enlisted, came back 4 years later, said, you know what, I'm too old to go back to college. So he applied for and was accepted at Harvard Law School. Editor of the Harvard Law Journal, very successful, offered big-time jobs, but he decided to come back to a little town of 7,000 in Illinois and practice law. I decided to become a lawyer at 3rd grade because I was so proud of what I saw my dad doing every day in helping people, helping them solve their problems, helping them build their businesses, becoming the most respected man in 3 counties, building a junior college, becoming mayor of the town and taking care of everybody that he could. The most well-respected man in 3 counties. And he passed away a couple years ago. So I knew I wanted to be an attorney from very young. And you know, over the last 37 years, I've spent all of my career in helping defend the fundamental rights of my clients. Because in the first year of law school, or second year of law school, I needed to get a job, and there was a little card I took off of the board to get a job. And interestingly enough, now I don't believe in coincidence, I ended up going to a law firm, and it was 4 Christian attorneys. Well, shortly thereafter, on September 20, 1974, I accepted the Lord, and I realized that there had been a reason that I was in law school and met those people, and I've dedicated my entire career to being a servant. And you know, I was talking to Bob Forey over here just a minute ago, and he mentioned to me that he was talking to another attorney about me, and the man said, yeah, but isn't he one of those religious wingnuts? Thanks. And you know, maybe I am, but I got to say this. I'm not ashamed of who I serve. And it has defined my life and my practice. In 37 years, I've helped defend freedom of religion, freedom of speech, political association, the right to life. I'm the state director of Americans United for Life the last 3 years, and I've worked in the pro-life movement the last 12. And you know, but over the course of that period of time, I've seen a complete disconnect between our Attorney General's office and the rest of the people of Idaho he's supposed to serve. I've seen our state become encroached on regularly and steadily by the federal government that does intend to make us the next subdivision of Washington, D.C. And I've seen people in need of an advocate. You know, after the Battle of Marathon in Greece, when the Greeks were attempting to preserve their freedom from the Persians, and the Greek galleys were out in the Bay of Salamis, they were rowed by free men. The Persians were all rowed by slaves. And the Greeks' battle cry of those as they rowed was, row for your father, row for your grandfather, row for freedom. That's what they said, and they prevailed. And you know what? We need to row for our children, row for our grandchildren, and row for freedom. As I said, there are a lot of reasons that I'm running for this office, but let me tell you how far afield our Attorney General has gone. He's been in office 24 years, 12 as deputy, 12 as Attorney General, and in that time, he has learned to side with government more than the people because he's forgotten where he came from. And here's how. And the federal lands issue. He thinks it's a fantasy for us to pursue recovery of our federal lands because he doesn't understand it is the economic necessity of this state. It is what we must do in order to rise up from being basically last in the country. We are in the midst of plenty and we are starving. He doesn't understand that. on the land board. He's the one who has instructed the rest of the board members that they must, the Constitution requires you to compete with private business. Even though our own Supreme Court in 1962 said that would be destructive of our republic. And his interpretation of the Constitution is simply skewed, absolutely skewed. He doesn't understand the purpose of the republic. He doesn't understand that the republic was a limited government, that was established to preserve our freedom. When government competes with us and takes away our opportunities, it forgets that the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and property were not given by government, they were given by God. Our Attorney General, I use the example of a case where the EPA was persecuting a family in North Idaho that just wanted to build a home on their lot. And the EPA said, this is wetlands, you can't build on it. Interestingly enough, they were in a subdivision surrounded by homes already built. And there were sewer and water hookups where they were just building on this lot, but it was wetlands. Our Attorney General said, I won't intervene because my client doesn't want me to. There's no state interest. He viewed his client as the Department of Water Resources, not the people in North Idaho. 12 or 10 other states joined in that case in their defense, and our Supreme Court said unanimously that the EPA had violated their constitutional rights. But our Attorney General didn't see his duty to the people. Even though one of his express duties is to protect the rights and property of the people of Idaho. He says that I have misinterpreted, in fact, he said this today, I misinterpreted that statute because it just applies to the Idaho Health Freedom Act. You know what? First, I didn't say this today, I should have, I was being nice. I didn't remind him he never has defended the Idaho Health Freedom Act. We have Obamacare here. But since he said that was what his duty was. But secondly, he misinterpreted the statute himself because it says protect and preserve the rights and property of the people of Idaho and defend the Idaho Health Freedom Act, and he hasn't done either one. So, you know, the problem, they put me last because I tend to talk a long time, and I don't need to talk a long time tonight. I just want to tell you, yeah, no, Kara's already looking at her watch. Let me close with this. You know, at the end of the last thing that was said today at the City Club, he got up for his closing statement and he said, we don't need a cheerleader. We need someone who knows the reality and will defend the Constitution. You know, I have defended the Constitution for the last 37 years, the original intent of the Constitution. The Constitution as it is supposed to be interpreted, not as a matter of convenience. And I'm not a cheerleader. As I told the people there, I said I'm an advocate, but here I'll tell you, I'm not a cheerleader, I'm a running back. You got a quarterback, and we need a running back. I'm gonna see that we get our lands back. We have a very good case for it. And I'll see that our rights are protected, and I'll see that you have an advocate in the office of Attorney General. Let's put back the balance in government. Let's limit it. Let's return it to the people. My name's Chris Troupis. I'm running for Attorney General.
You can hold on to this mic, Russ. Hold on to it. We appreciate everybody's introductions. Good stuff. I also realize I need to have my wife stand up over here. My beautiful wife stand up. This is my lovely wife of 17 years. We've been married for 17 years. She's been putting up with me. And this is great. This reminds me of some of y'all know I used to be a pastor for 10 years in Central California. This reminds me of the fellowship meetings. We had all the preachers up there, and they're all long-winded, and they would say, and my first in closing. But my first question I want to ask these guys is, and we don't want to get too long into it, but this question, why are you running for office? I don't want just a generic answer. I want to get here really intense on a couple of these specific issues, because I have a reason that I'm running for office myself, and it gets to, I want my children to stand up. I have 5 children, lovely children, Mariah, Miranda, Marissa, Micaiah, and Manoah. Here they are. Raise your hands up high, everybody. I'm also a political refugee. My family and I escaped a communist tyrannical regime by the skin of our teeth. We just barely made it out of California a few years ago. And it's a long story I won't get into here, but understand I could have moved any single place I wanted to in the entire country. I took 5 years searching for the right place to move to. I visited 22 states, over 100 metropolitan areas. We narrowed it down to 50 cities. I took those 50 cities and I created my own metrics with 21 different factors for what we were looking for in a place we wanted to live. I took those 21 factors, scored them a 1 to 10, and with an objective scoring system, Boise came to the top of the list. Okay? True story. So we moved here without any friends, without any family. I wasn't coming for a job. I owned my own business. I came here intentionally because I wanted to plant deep roots to preserve freedom for my children, my grandchildren, our posterity. And I'm saying that because what most people don't know, I know how much Idahoans love California. But let me tell you something. 40 years ago, where I lived in Central California, which now looks like a war zone, looked almost identical to what the Treasure Valley looks like right now. And the biggest problem that we have, maybe not the biggest, but one of them, is that the government officials and our leaders who mess everything up for future generations are long gone after all of the next generations have to endure the garbage that they gave us. It was just 40 years ago, the great Ronaldus Magnus, Ronald Reagan, was governor of the state of California. Now it's a complete disaster area. I'm here to tell you that if we hold on to the Idaho State Healthcare Exchange, OtterCare, Obamacare, that our governor and a complicit Republican Party forced down our throats, my children are going to suffer, and my grandchildren are going to suffer, and the governor will be long gone from the scene. The Speaker of the House will be long, no one even know who he was. No one will even remember the names of the men who irresponsibly forced socialism on a free republic. So we have two choices. We can stand here, we could curse the darkness, throw dust in the air, and we can say there's nothing we could do because, the establishment is too strong. Or at some point in time, you have to stand up and say, no more. If I go down, at least I'm going to go down fighting. I did not move here to Idaho so that I could go through that same process I just shared with you 10 years from now again. I don't want my children going through that process. I came here to die here, and I want my great-grandchildren to be able to experience the same freedom that I have right now and even better. So that's why I'm running, but I wonder, you gentlemen here, if any of you have something beyond that, well, I want to make a difference. I get that. If that's your answer, then we're going to skip you. And I do not want to hear the lame platitude, I believe we can do better. I don't want to hear that. If you have something very legit that you want to tell me that, if you've got a story or something you want to share specifically about why you're running right now at this particular point in time, because this is a historic election, am I right? Yep. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is this not the greatest number of constitutional state officers that have had incumbent challenges to the incumbency in how many years? Ever? Ever. So this is a true battle for the establishment, the powers that be, right? And the grassroots. Those who see government as a force to feed their own pocketbooks, and those who see government as a tool to protect the people. So, that being said, gentlemen, do any of you have something you want to share? We'll start with you, Russ, why you're running for office.
Okay. You got friends now. You may not have had when you moved here, but you do now.
That's right.
I typically save this story as my close, but I don't know how this is going to go. So I'm going to share it with you now because it's pertinent here.
By the way, we only got a few minutes for each one.
1997, I was working for a technology company, and I was one of the people on a team. I was one of the point people on this team we were evaluating the purchase of a facility. We purchased an electronics manufacturing facility in Colfontaine, Belgium for $1 US. $1 US. The assets, if I recall correctly, just the assets alone, the fundamental equipment which was current at the time, was worth in excess of $500 million. The workforce was educated. They're pretty good. If you look at the books, by operational standpoints, it was a profitable facility. So how in the world could we buy that facility for $1? Folks, we bought it for $1 because that was the only exit strategy the current owner had to get out from under the mandated government social costs, the largest of which was healthcare. I challenge you to take a look at the healthcare system in Belgium today. It is strikingly similar to a fully implemented Affordable Care Act. Folks, if you take a look at the website, the legislative site, and you see the passion of Fulcher, Judy Boyle, others plugged into this thing who are fighting it, what you will see, at least in my case, is somebody, I know where this goes. I know the result. I know the end game here, folks. If you want to control a society, how do you do it? You control their health care. You control your education system. Have you ever heard of the Affordable Care Act? Have you ever heard of Common Core, No Child Left Behind, Goals 2000, Race to the Top? I know where this leads, folks. Now's the time. That's why I'm running.
Jim?
Well, in my opening remarks, I think I might have said it best. For 12 years, I've worked on one issue. It's so important, and it's getting our land back. But I will also tell you this. Along that way, it's been very inspirational from a couple standpoints, and I've got to stand on the shoulders of giants. One of them sitting in this room right now is Judy Boyle. And you know, the groundwork that they've laid, we can't let it go to waste.
That's right.
We just can't do it. And I also said I have 8 children, and the youngest one is 7, and I've got 1 grandchild. And so I would like you to think of this. Go home tonight, because this is something I think is very, very important. Write a letter that your kids will read and your grandkids will read 50, 70, 80 years from now about the world, what it was right today, and what you were willing to fight for, and what you were willing to sacrifice, and what you were willing to give up so they'd have it like we've had it, and even better. Because that's what this battle is about. When 56 men signed their names to a Declaration of Independence and pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors, they did so knowing most of them would die and probably be broke. Ask yourself this question. Would you sign the Declaration of Independence today? And then remember this. We were given a gift. We don't have to change our government at the point of a gun. We change our government through an elective process, through the representative process, by changing our representatives. And I still believe today we have that opportunity to do that with these gentlemen up here, Diego here, and I know there's a couple other people out here who are running for office for the first time, and God bless you guys and women for getting engaged in that battle. That's why I'm doing this. I don't want to see those gifts that we were given gone awry. I want to make sure we leave this place better than we found it, and our kids and our grandkids aren't stuck with $17 trillion in debt that they have no say in. We have that responsibility, and it's up to you. Your destiny, not mine, not Russ's, not John's, not Chris's, not Todd. Your destiny and our children's destiny is in your hands. That's how I look at this. That's why I'm running.
I appreciate that. You guys actually hold on, John, because we're going to come to Common Core in a second. I want you to incorporate what you're saying in the question I'm going to ask in a minute. So for sake of time, we just hold on to that microphone. I appreciate that, gentlemen. The next question we want to get to right before Common Core is on the health care exchange. So here's the deal, gentlemen. I got 2 questions on this health care exchange, all right? The first one is this. We have been told that it's the law. It's already the law. There's nothing you can do. Here we are. We've got to deal with it. So I got 2 questions to ask, and you can answer them in this order. Number 1, is Obamacare, the state healthcare exchange, is it fundamentally and morally wrong? Yes or no? Number 2, if it is fundamentally and morally wrong, how do we at the state level implement what is morally wrong and somehow accept that? So I've asked several folks before who are all in support of this healthcare exchange, and they say this. They say, well, Diego, it's wrong. One man told me Obamacare is evil. He voted for the healthcare exchange, but he said it's evil. I said, well, let's just say that the federal government passed a bill the same way they passed Obamacare that took away our gun rights and eliminated the Second Amendment. Would you then vote for Idaho being the one to execute the confiscation of our guns because it's better for Idaho to do what's morally wrong as opposed to the federal government doing it? I mean, it's pure sophistry. It's nonsense. So my question is this. Do you view the state healthcare exchange as something we can legitimately eliminate? 1. Or 2, do you see it as something that we're just going to have to work together with the federal government to make the best out of what we got? So we're going to start with you, Russ.
It's morally wrong. It's ethically wrong, fiscally wrong. We do 2 things. The first thing we do is we stop taking state resources to prop it up. No more state money, no more state man hours to prop this thing up. This thing is... Isn't it ironic? My political director tells me that's a Alanis Morissette line. But isn't it ironic that President Obama is delaying implementation and Idaho is scrambling to sign people up? First thing we do is we stop taking state resources to prop the thing up. Second thing we do is we put in place an alternative that is a free market alternative. It looks like this. It's got a healthcare savings account component, puts the money in the hands of the people. It's got a healthcare membership capability so that you can sign up with a physician or group of physicians for a healthcare coverage depending on your means. So that you know you've got a certain healthcare coverage, just like a health club membership. We open up direct competition, heaven forbid, so that you can have insurance companies competing for your business. Why did we take the free market out of healthcare? It works. Let's put it back in. 4th thing, you put in a direct pay component. Because there just might be a physician in Meridian that will treat your strep throat and give you a prescription for $100 when the guy in or gal in Boise is charging $150. There's an alternative. Now let's talk about the more difficult component I think Diego was referring to. There are some mandates of the Affordable Care Act that I think are ethically and morally wrong. How about the mandatory abortifacient component? There is the danger, folks, of adopting federal mandates when they're not in the best interest of the people. And I would challenge my opponent, and I would state to you, there is a role of leadership where you stand up and say, this is not in the best interest of our people. We're going to fight that. And I certainly hope that I have an attorney general that will help me do exactly that, because we got to take it to them, folks. We can't accept that. That's not in the best interest of our people. We create a private alternative, and then we go after them for the egregious components that are just plain wrong.
Specifically to Chris. Chris, as Attorney General, if you're elected, 2 questions in a consolidated manner, not the long-winded preacher version. In the consolidated manner, the question is, distinguish your position on the Idaho State Healthcare Exchange from the current Attorney General. And number 2, what would you do if elected to help eliminate the healthcare exchange we have right now from a legal perspective?
Okay. briefly. My opponent, the Attorney General, he crows about the fact that he joined in the Affordable Care Act case that went to the United States Supreme Court. And he did. He joined in it with a number of other states, didn't really do a heck of a lot of work, but he was in the case. And when the Supreme Court decided on narrow grounds that it was constitutional because it was not a penalty but a tax, he decided the battle's over. And even though we passed the Idaho Idaho Health Freedom Act that requires him to oppose any law that mandates that people buy government mandated insurance, he has never defended it. Never asserted that it is defensible, even though he will tell you that he defends the Constitution until a court rules otherwise. Now, that distinguishes me from him because there are plenty of defenses to the Idaho Health Freedom Act. There are two that I can think of that have not been challenged in Idaho. One, that it's a direct tax that was not passed pursuant to Article 1, Section 3 of the United States Constitution because it was not apportioned between the states. He argues that in the Supreme Court decision there happens to be one paragraph that refers to it not being a direct tax. That is what is referred to as dicta. In other words, it was not a holding the court. The Supreme Court did not have to decide the case on those grounds. All they had to decide was it a penalty or a tax? They didn't have to decide as a tax, was it constitutional or not? But Justice Roberts threw that in a sentence that, well, I don't think it's an unconstitutional direct tax either. The court did not rule on that. And as a result, there are presently two cases challenged in the District of Columbia Court of Appeals on that precise issue. We could raise the same. Secondly, we are supposed to enforce as a state exchange with a federal mandate that state exchange, we are obligated to enforce the penalties. As Attorney General, I would bring suit under the Idaho Health Freedom Act to enjoin the enforcement of any penalties against any Idahoan who does not buy into mandated insurance.
Amen. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Give a quick response to that, and then I got another question to ask you guys about the 10th Amendment.
I will, and Russ, you'd have a lieutenant governor who would battle with you on that. I want to point out one thing about tradition in this country. In 1848, we passed a thing called the Fugitive Slave Act. That was upheld by the Supreme Court. It was never overturned. The states didn't honor it. The states banded together. Okay, we had Dred Scott. It has not been overturned. That's a Supreme Court precedence. The states did not honor it. The states can overturn precedents when they band together and they do what is right. You know what happens when we don't do what is right? In 1942, we interned Americans and we took their liberty and their property from them. That was never overturned, and that was an executive order signed by the President of the United States. And ask yourself this question: what happens if Rosa Parks goes to the back of the bus and doesn't break the law? She did break the law. This country has a storied tradition of standing up and banding together when something is morally wrong and doing the right thing, and that's what we have to do.
Hold on to the mic. That brings me to my next question. Why don't you hold on the mic? We'll pass this around really quick. The 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution says this, very specifically: the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states or reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Now, I've asked this question to many legislators and many executives, and I asked them this question: under what circumstances do you feel ready, prepared, and justified to invoke the 10th Amendment and resist federal tyranny? And the most common answer I get is, I don't know. I say, if it's wrong, do you or do you not do this? Well, yeah, it's wrong, but it's the law. It's the law, so we have to. If the 10th Amendment cannot be invoked and can't be used, then it might as well not even exist. There's specific enumerated powers in the Constitution. I know you guys know this and understand this. My question is, in your opinion, the five gentlemen on the panel here, specifically Russ, Jim, specifically you, Chris, the 10th Amendment right here, is Obamacare. Is this issue in this law the type of law where you would invoke the 10th Amendment and say, Idaho, you already said you just would. I don't know if you guys caught that. I caught it. That this is not an issue we're going to force Idahoans to do. What would be your response on the 10th Amendment and how it applies to Obamacare?
Thought I just answered that. Those powers not delegated to the federal government by the states are reserved to the states.
So why don't you give me some, because you did answer that, give me some commentary on what Justice Roberts said in his ruling on Obamacare when he said this: the states are separate and independent sovereigns. Sometimes they have to act like it.
It's perfectly clear what he's saying. We need to stand up for what is ours. We created the monster called the federal government. The states put the federal government in place, not the other way around. We have got to get back to recognize it is the states that have most of the rights. I'm not a constitutional expert on this, but from what I've read and from what I can see and what I just got through explaining about those Supreme Court precedent cases, when we band together and we stand together for what's right, and that's what it takes. It takes people banding together. Do you think if Idaho stands up, you think Utah might stand up?
Yeah.
Think if Utah stands up, Montana might stand up? Mm-hmm. Think if Montana stands up, Wyoming might stand up? See how that works? That's called leadership. That's something that is so lacking today about just doing what is right. For me, it's not too complicated.
Russ, give us some commentary on that.
When the federal government steps out of bounds, and when I mean step out of bounds, I mean the constitutional bounds, when they impose on the states or they pass laws that clearly are outside of that constitutional authority, I believe that the states, via the 10th Amendment, have not only the right but the obligation to stand. That's our place, folks. And that's not always a popular spot, but that's how I believe our divinely inspired founders designed this document, and that's why that's in there.
Fantastic. Hold on to that. Go ahead, John.
This definitely applies to education. We as a state, through a consortium states, have voluntarily given up our state and local control of our schools in acquiescence to federal mandates in order to get out of No Child Left Behind. Well, NCLB in the first place does not need to be waived. It needs to be repealed based on the 10th Amendment.
That's exactly right.
Exactly right. We have made assurances that deliver us to a socialist system when it comes to education. We definitely need to evoke the 10th Amendment.
Fantastic. That's what I wanted to hear. Where, for those of you who've read the Constitution, where is education in the Constitution? It's not in there, folks. According to the 10th Amendment, the federal government has nothing to do at all with education. That's our duty and responsibility at the state level. Go ahead and respond to that really quick.
Also, you got to realize they're also trying to backdoor taking states' rights away. I was in with the state controller today at the Statesman editorial board, and he was touting how he just came back from the Western or the controllers conference and how they work through collaboration to come up with new and innovative ideas. What they're doing is the same thing with the controllers, the governors, the Western Governors Association. They go with all these Western states, and they all come back with the same thing, convinced to implement the same program. That takes away the competitiveness of Idaho to be more competitive than other states. If you're all doing the same thing, why would somebody choose to locate to one state or the other? And this follows right down to the same thing at the county and city level. The Idaho Association of Counties try to convinces all the counties to adopt the same program. It takes away your county's resources and puts it into a collaborative effort among, all the states or all the counties. So there's there's nothing setting one city, one county, one state out above another one as far as economic development in these aspects. So,
fantastic. So I've got three more issues we want to get to real quick before we open us for Q&A. Three really quick. The first one's going to be Common Core. I'm going to let you guys know in advance. The second one's going to be Land Board. And the third one is I want to expose some corruption from the very high levels of our state government that I've been seeing over the last 90 days. I'm going to just make it as plain as could be here on the screens and captured everywhere so everybody knows what in the world's going on. 'Cause there's some garbage going on here that's like Chicago-style politics, New York-style politics, D.C.-style politics, and people don't know about it. And it's stealing money out of your back pocket and putting it into theirs, and I want you guys to know what's going on. And I'm going to challenge these guys to see what they're willing to do and say to make sure that they stay accountable, that doesn't go any further. But the next issue, of course, is Common Core. So we're going to start with you, John. The question I have regarding Common Core, and everybody here knows, for the most part, what Common Core is, but there's three things we want you to cover really quick. Give them a very quick overview what it is. Explain and describe as quickly as possible why you are opposing Common Core contrary to all of the other candidates. You all understand this is the only candidate running for Superintendent of Public Instruction who is opposing Common Core, and the only one who stands for states' rights in education. It makes your election, in my opinion, a no-brainer.
Thank you.
And last but not least, what would you suggest as the alternative? Cover those three things really quick.
Okay, I have to ask a favor. I really need to share my convictions as to why I am running.
Please do.
Okay.
In the introduction.
First of all, when you see danger approaching the gates of the city, it is our obligation to warn the people. You know, we're told that there's a way that seems right unto man, but the end thereof leads to destruction. And that is imperative to realize when we're dealing with Common Core. Secondly, I'm running because my wife challenged me. And she simply said, you know, there are no doors shut. You need to pray about this. And for 41 years, that has been our motto in our relationship, that we would seek God's divine guidance in the decisions that we have to make. And then thirdly, for four gentlemen who mean the world to me, Karl Hynek, Charlie Genzel, Gifford Abbott, and Don Mattson. Karl Hynek did not come home from Vietnam. He went down in his A4 Sky Raider. Charlie Genzel came home from Vietnam as a triple amputee. I admire him more than just about anybody I know because he didn't make excuses in his life. He came home, he got an education, he married his childhood sweetheart. They had 6 kids and I don't know how many grandchildren. And he went on to be the deputy controller of the state of Delaware for a long time. Finally, Don Mattson. We were classmates in aviation officer candidate school, went through flight training together, and he left a bride and 2 little children when he went to his watery grave in the Baltic Sea during the Bosnian conflict. Well, we have been convinced, my generation, that our responsibility was to put in check Marxist socialism. But we have a more insidious evil to fight in our homeland, and that is Fabian socialism that has come to us through gradualism. And Common Core is the capstone of the progressive socialist reform movement. And if you don't believe that, all you have to do is look at the architects of Common Core and what they stand for. They are absolute adherents to John Dewey, the founder of the progressive socialist reform movement in America. And he stood for collectivism and for creating a socialist global citizen out of our children. And if you don't think that that has not been coming incrementally down through the decades and rearing its ugly head many, many times, then you're mistaken. That's where we're at with Common Core. We are giving up our precious liberties and sovereignty as a state to pursue this in the consortium. That's what's wrong with Common Core. What was your second question?
Give them a quick overview what Common Core actually is for those who don't even know.
Common Core was the brainchild of the National Governors Association. They formed together actually back in 1988, I believe, at a summit in the University of Virginia to create Goals 2000. which also morphed into No Child Left Behind. The whole idea and the whole intent through that process was to create a crisis in education and come up with a solution. The solution was Common Core. They actually contracted out for standards to be written that were supposedly more rigorous. In the process of contracting for those standards, they neglected to include Idaho teachers or any educators from most of these states. They pulled their own corporate people together to create these standards. And now in the process, it's been found out that the validation committee for their own standards has charged the committee with bias and an ethics problem with the way those standards were forced upon the states. Now that there's peer review taking place, it's become evident that not only did they neglect including early childhood education professionals and psychologists in this process, that the K through 3 standards themselves are so developmentally inappropriate that as it plays out in the SBAC testing, it is abusive to our children. Basically, that's Common Core. Question number 2 was?
You covered it. You covered what I had.
And
Yeah.
number 3?
You covered
What
them
would
all.
we do to replace it?
What would you suggest as an alternative?
Okay, as an alternative to it, we need to reconvene the Education Task Force. We need to get Idaho educators together and come up with our own rigorous standards. I cannot see why anyone would object to that. We also need to replace the SBAC test immediately. As I have surveyed superintendents and administrators throughout the state, prior to No Child Left Behind, we had a wonderful assessment tool in our schools, and it was developed by the NWEA called MAP testing. And it provides a true baseline of how much progress a student makes over the course of the year, rather than just a snapshot of where they are at on that given day when they take the SBAC. And the beauty of it is, it's a fraction of the cost of the SBAC. So there's much better options out there.
Fantastic. Russ, question I have for Russ. You have been accused by some as having, quote unquote, voted for Common Core and then flip-flop and changed your mind. How would you respond to someone who makes that accusation?
2011, what is now identified as Common Core, and I don't think it was called that at that point, was brought in front of the education committees in the Senate and the House. I'm a member of the Education Committee. And it was Superintendent Luna at that time, and you may recall Jeb Bush, who was the governor of Florida, was traveling around, and they were espousing the positive elements of Common Core. And the primary, and I went back and I checked my notes on this just to make sure I wasn't just sleeping during these sessions, but the reality was they were espousing that this was a way to establish local control in perpetuity for Idaho, the Idaho education system. This was a tool that was going to guarantee that we were going to have local control here. Eventually, although we questioned and whatnot, but eventually we supported our superintendent and we agreed to that. And that was on a unanimous basis throughout the education committees and the legislature. But you know what? As this thing got rolled out and as new information started coming available that was never ever communicated on the front end, like SBAC, which was the testing standard, and the curriculum control, as this thing started rolling out, it was pretty clear this was not being delivered as advertised. And folks, what do you do when somebody sells you something and it's not what you bought? You take it back. And that's exactly where I'm at right now. We take it back.
Fantastic. Appreciate that. We'll hold on to that. In just a minute, we're privileged to have Lawerence Denney running for a Secretary of State here in Idaho. We're going to have him introduce himself in just a second. for sake of time, before we get to the land board issue, which is relevant to everybody here except for you, but I know you still have the right position on it, there is something that really concerns me, and I want to bring this up to these gentlemen right here, and it's the issue of what I call cronyism and corruption that I see going on right here in the state of Idaho. Now, let me give you a real quick definition for this term cronyism. It says cronyism is partiality to friends, especially by appointing them to positions of authority regardless of their qualifications. Politically, cronyism often includes corruption when the appointer and the beneficiary are not only in social contact, but they mutually benefit financially from the arrangement at the expense of the taxpayer. Now, you would think from a guy coming from a place like California where, yeah, we expect that. I come here and think, oh, Idaho, it's clean. It's a Republican state. That stuff doesn't go on over there. All those good Christian, God-fearing people would never allow corruption and cronyism in the state of Idaho. Right? Wrong. All right? I want to give you just one simple example of something that I've seen. And I've seen so much of this that we could have an entire forum on just this issue and what I have seen in my involvement in the last 90 days. So much so that it almost makes me, and forgive the language, it makes me want to vomit, literally. And it's going on here in the state of Idaho. And here's what bothers me most. When I talk to people in the legislature in the know, like the guys behind me on the panel, oh yeah, that goes on all the time. That's what's going on, and everybody knows it. But when you talk to the constituents and the voters, they have no idea. Really? That's happening? Really? That's going on? I didn't know that. And sometimes, admittedly, it's a little complicated to follow the path. But once you see it, it's so plain, it'll make your head nearly explode. And let me just give you one example. We can give you dozens of examples. It's funny because we talked about this in a webcast we did a couple weeks ago, and then you had a press release about it like a day or two later, so I didn't feel so bad talking about it. But here's the way I look at it. I believe there are certain things that need to be held in confidence and things that need to be kept secret. National security issues, issues of personal privacy that have to do with people's personal issues. I was a counselor for a lot of people in an inner city church where they gave me their whole life story. The things they told me will die with me and nobody will ever know about them ever. But the things that our public representatives do as public officials is public information, and the public should know about it, and it's time to start naming names. And so in a minute, I'm going to ask you guys if you'd be willing in office to start naming names instead of saying, well, I heard this guy say, and a lobbyist said this, and so I'm sick of that garbage. Who said it? They're taking my money. They're taking your money. Tell me, why are we afraid to name the names? It's in the book. It says name them. It tells us to do it. Here's an example. This fella right here, and I don't know this guy. I've never met him, but his name's Jason Ronk. He used to be the number 2 guy at IACI, which is a pretty big lobbyist organization. Here's our vice president. Now, just so you know, IACI, and Jason here specifically, here's his picture. He was one of the main lobbyists who was lobbying very hard for the passage of the Idaho State Healthcare Exchange, okay? Now, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, what we call the big blues, they're pretty big members of IACI. So here he is lobbying with IACI to help get this passed. I just want you to follow the money as you see here on the board, okay? The big blues, Blue Cross Blue Shield, they stand to benefit big time, obviously, from the Idaho State Healthcare Exchange. Why? Because it's a government mandate to buy their product. If I made pencils, I would want to be lobbying these guys if I was a crook, to say, you guys need to make it a government mandate that people need to buy pencils. Since I'm the biggest pencil maker in town, I'm going to make a whole lot of money. Now, I have no problem with anybody making money. I hope they all make billions. But do it without the force of government. Make your money based on just you offering a product or service to the free market that people want or need, that you offer at a price that they're willing to pay for. Not by forcing the hand of government to take money out of your pocket and my pocket and put it into theirs. That's just wrong. Do you guys agree that that's wrong? Well, recently in the announcement about the Idaho State Healthcare Exchange, it was announced that more than 76 Idahoans have signed up for coverage in the exchange. Am I right, Russ, that we're number 2 in terms of how many people signed up per capita? Well, here's the thing. That more than 76,000, here's the crazy number. 50%, this was like a little line in the newspaper article. There's one that I caught real fast. 50% of them signed up through Blue Cross. Here is the article in the Idaho Statesman. It says it right here. Bam, I'll zoom in. Blue Cross of Idaho sold plans to more than half of all people who use the state exchange. The insurer said earlier this month that about 45,000 people signed up for health care on the exchange. Now do the math with me just real quick. This is just year one, by the way. That's 45,000 people. If we just assumed, and I don't know if your health care is this cheap, if we just assumed that the average plan was $3,000, which trust me, that's low, right? Yeah, I see everybody laughing. Yeah, please. Let's just assume it's 45,000 people and they spend $3,000. That's $135 million just in the state of Idaho to their bottom line, into their back pocket, that was forced and mandated by the force of Idaho state government. Is it any wonder they were lobbying hard to get this thing passed? That should bother us. I see there's two types of lobbyists. There's one lobbyist who says, hey, government, stay out of my life and stay out of my business life. I can understand that kind of lobbying. Then there's the other type of lobbyist who says, hey, government, work things in my advantage so that I get money from the state. That's wrong. Well, here's what happened, folks. Follow the money. This is the number 2 guy at IACI. There you see right there is his LinkedIn profile. What does this guy who was one of the main lobbyists to pass IACI, now he works as Governor Otter's campaign manager. You can see right here his experience. He used to be right here, Vice President, Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. Now he's a campaign manager for Otter for Idaho. Well, you think that's a coincidence? I don't think so. Now watch this. Here is an invitation from the IACI board chairman. We got access to this. I'm going to read this to you because you can't see it right here. But this was a fund, and I know I'm probably making Russ and some of these guys uncomfortable. But if I get elected, I'm going to make you guys uncomfortable a lot. So just prepare for it. Because why shouldn't you know about this stuff? It's wrong. And when people find out, they're like, I didn't know that was going on. I thought Butch was just a nice, good old cowboy. Right? So, and I'm not here to slam Butch. I'm here to just share facts. Anytime somebody stands up and says, I want to represent you, I want to lead you, and I want to take taxpayer dollars to pay, my bills, you should naturally be skeptical of all of us. Naturally. We're asking for a leadership position. You should be skeptical. You should know all this stuff. Look what this invitation was here back in November and December. This is Mike Reynoldson, the chairman of the board, talking about his discussion with Jason Ronk. And they're basically saying here, I don't have time to read the whole thing, but we can get you copies of this. They're sharing how they're going to give the maximum donation back to Governor Otter now that the Idaho State Healthcare Exchange has been passed. And they're asking all of their members, see it right here, to bring a $5,000 check to fully max out to the governor for the 2014 election. No special interest. Well, that's not cronyism. That's not corruption, is it? Now, we had a friend take this stuff because it was reviewed by some policy wonk, and they said that there's all types of violations in just this particular letter right here. It was taken to the Secretary of State's office. Guess what they've done with it? They first intimidated our friend Lee Rice, who took it down to them, and to try to get him to not open an investigation. Then they just sat it there and won't touch it. That's the kind of stuff that's going on. This is just one example. We could be here all night long to talk about all the guys on the governor's campaign board for re-election who are all lobbyists. One of them in a major scandal for the Wi-Fi. I don't even have time. It literally makes me want to vomit. So here's my question to you guys. It starts out with you, Russ. I didn't tell Russ I was going to do this, so he's up there looking all nervous. He could beat me up later. It doesn't matter. My question to you guys is this. First of all, when you get into office, if it's God's will and the people elect you, are you, number one, going to be willing to expose this corruption and eliminate it? That's the first question. And number two, what assurances can you give us now? Because we're all skeptical. You guys should be skeptical of me. We're all skeptical of everybody that at some point in time when you're in this system, you get sucked in the abyss and even good men change. So what assurances can you guys give us that you're not going to go down that path as well? And I want to hear from all, now that we've got Lawerence here, all 6 of you guys. So let's start with you, Russ.
The answer is yes, and I have an inherent advantage here because I don't want this job that bad. Okay, and I mean that sincerely. I have never had a burning desire to be a senator, and I do not have a burning desire to be a governor because you know what? I got a life. I've got a wife, I've got kids, I've got a business. And one of the biggest challenges that we faced as a family in deciding whether or not to make this run was whether or not, because we knew we just might win. Okay? All right? It was whether or not we were willing to take a minimum of 4 years of our life and put it on hold. Folks, this is not my objective. In fact, I'll go so far as to share this with you. I have been approached not once, not twice, but 3 times by people in heavy, influential positions who said, Fulcher, Russ, if you'll just back off, if you'll back off now, we will make sure you're the guy in 18. You can be the governor. And you'll have our support. It'll be a slam dunk. 2 problems, folks. Number 1, I don't want to be anybody's guy. Number 2, is now is the time because there are several things coming down the pike and we've all talked about them. The healthcare stuff, the education stuff. There's a clock ticking on this because even the government will figure out how to run a website in the next 4 years, okay? The second part of Diego's question, which is a good question, and I'm not nervous at all about answering this, folks, is, you know what? We all need accountability. We all need accountability. And not by design, but I would argue potentially by maybe just a little bit of divine intervention, there's a whole host of folks who have decided to challenge for some of these offices that offer, I believe, to be great accountability. Because I'll tell you what, when I look at Denney and Chmelik and Eynon and Troupis and Hatfield, I see guys who would be more than willing to slap me upside the head when I go outside the bounds, and they should. And you know what? I would be so bold as to say, I'll return the favor.
Amen. We want to hear from Lawerence Denney. By the way, as soon as we're done here, we're going to take the Q&A, so get your questions ready. We're going to have a mic runner running these microphone out to you so you guys have your questions ready here. Lawerence.
Thank you. That is a very good question. Let me answer it this way. The media has said that they don't like me because I would be too political. Ladies and gentlemen, the code is not political. If you are enforcing the code, you are following the law. You know, as far as investigating someone who has charges, I think that we need to aggressively investigate those charges. And I think...
In fact, Lawerence, do you know of any examples that the current Secretary of State's office has let issues that otherwise should have been investigated slip by? Chris, was that a leading question, by the way?
Well, you know, I can think of a couple.
Give me one. We only got time for one.
Well, there is a senator in District 11, you know, that actually does not live in that district. You know, there is a vagueness in the law that allows him to do that, but my advice would be that allows the secretary to do that. But, you know, my advice to the senator would be you either need to move back inside your district or you need to resign. You know, that's just one example. you know, and there are others. If we are going to enforce the election laws, we need to enforce them uniformly.
That's right.
I mean, they need to be enforced the same for me as they are for you. And if you let your friends slip by, then that's just plain wrong, especially if you are prosecuting others. And I think certainly, as Russ said, if I don't do my job uniformly and fairly with everyone, then I expect him to slap me up alongside the head.
Jim, we want to hear from you.
I'll tell you this, when it was rumored that I was going to get in this election, I received quite a few phone calls from around the state from people saying, Jim, we feel you have a bright political future in the state of Idaho and with the Republican Party. My response back to them was, I'm not looking for a bright political future. What I am looking for is a bright and prosperous state of Idaho. And I will tell you this, everything that my wife and I have taught our children, integrity, honesty, principles matter, to go back on any of that I couldn't walk in and look my kids in the eye because I went back on any of those character traits is something I would never do. Because everything that means everything to me and my family will have been done for and just flushed down the toilet. Guys, it has to matter. This question doesn't make me nervous one bit because we don't have this today. I've seen too much of it. And then I've seen too many people, and I mentioned one tonight, Judy Boyd with Elizabeth Hodge here, Bob Forey, people who stand on principle. Guys, when you get to stand on those shoulders, I gotta tell you something, the view's pretty nice. They laid the groundwork. The last thing I'd ever wanna do, ever, is let them down, and they've done the work. My in-laws who have been in this battle for so long in this state, probably 40 years battling to do what is right, to let them down, are you kidding me? No way. No way. What they've done means too much to me. I would never do that.
Appreciate that, John. The reason I think this is important, I want people to hear from their hearts, because you're going to make judgment calls based on their eyes and their hearts.
First of all, I am the absolute conviction that one day we will all stand before our Heavenly Father.
That's right.
And give an account for our actions, for our words, and the way we've treated others. Secondly, there's a 91-year-old man, my father, whom I look up to, and he's lived a life of integrity. And I can remember getting ready to go off my freshman year of college, and Dad sitting me down and saying, son, you know, I've shared all of my values, all the principles that I think are worth living for. Now you're going to be challenged in every value system, in every belief system that I have instilled in you down through the years as you go off to college. He said, I believe that you have character and integrity as well, but I want you to know, son, that a man of principle willing to stand on principle is going to have to be willing to stand alone. And I can tell you that going through this process of speaking out against Common Core in my own local school district as a classroom teacher, I've had to stand alone. And I'm willing to continue doing that, to stand for what is right, for principle, and for integrity. That's my heart.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Chris?
Briefly, right? Yeah, okay. Briefly.
We got to get to Q&A. Y'all got your questions ready?
So I already told you that it took me about 4 months to decide to run for this office. Russ, before he announced, he asked me, we had a meeting, and he asked me if I would run for Attorney General. And I said, I'm going to pray about it, and I'm going to think about it, and talk to my wife, and we did, and didn't have peace. Just didn't have peace about it. even though I know at the time there was a lot of reasons to do it. A lot of other people asked me, and months went by, and I got in this race very late. And it was because finally I felt this heavy conviction that it was something that I had to do. It wasn't a choice. It was, at that point, it just felt like I was being kind of forced into it. And I went to my wife and I prayed about it and talked about it. Then I went to my pastor and we spent about an hour in prayer and talked about it. And he looked at me and he said, you know you've got the ability to do this. You know God's laid it on your heart. Question is, are you going to be obedient or not? And I decided then and there that I was going to do it. And, you know, I've had the peace about it ever since. And I told him, I said, well, I don't know whether I can win. And he says, he didn't call you to run to win. He just called you to run. He'll take care of the winning. So to answer your question, you know, I practiced law for 37 years. And the crazy thing is most people, when they hire an attorney, they really don't know what their attorney does. They've heard from a friend, this is a good guy or a bad guy. They don't know whether he's good or bad. They don't know if he knows what he's doing. They trust him based on the first meeting. And then once you get involved in a case, 90% of what you do, the client doesn't know whether it's right or wrong or in their best interest or not. It is a matter of trust. Most people don't know if they've been billed for something that's proper or improper, if the attorney has inflated it, this is why attorneys have such a bad reputation, and much of it is earned. But you know what? In my practice, for the last 37 years, I have dealt with these clients as a servant and as people that trust me. I knew at all times they had to just trust me because there was no way they could make me accountable otherwise. There was no way they would be able to know whether I was doing what was right or wrong. But as I stand here today, I can tell you that I gave 110% to every single client because I know who I'm accountable to too. And in this job, the first thing that I intend to do, because you know what, it's no different in our Attorney General's office. There's no way you can know whether our Attorney General inside that office is doing right or wrong, whether he's making good decisions or bad decisions, because they can tell you and they can explain it in legal terms you'll never understand. But let me tell you this. Over the last 12 years, our Attorney General has gotten deputies into every branch of the executive part of the government. There's one in Health and Welfare, one in Tax Department, one in the Labor Department. They're all over. And yet that same Attorney General advises the legislature about the laws and then these executive agencies about the rules that they write through their deputies. And when those agencies do something that the legislature thinks is in excess, well, they've got an attorney, the Attorney General is supposed to be advising the legislature and at the same time has somebody in their department. So one of the first things I propose to do is make the Attorney General the watchdog he's supposed to be by eliminating the connection between the Attorney Generals and the deputies in those agencies. And secondly, I propose that every agency's activities, including the Attorney General's office, be audited at the beginning of the next section as soon as a new Attorney General is elected. We need an audit. We need transparency. People have to have confidence in their government. And
Amen.
That transparency has to continue from here on out.
Amen.
I have two businesses that I run, and I don't need something else to do, really. But 3 years ago, the land board passed a rule change that eliminated small businesses from the timber industry. That brings 80% of the revenue to the endowments. It put all in the hands of the big businesses because it eliminated the small businesses because they didn't have as much equipment on the rating system or as big of financial statements. We got that overturned. Judy Boyle helped overturn that, and Lawerence Denney did. After the land board passed these rules, we got them overturned in the House and the Senate. And then, I started looking into more, and there's another part under the land board. It's the Endowment Fund Investment Board, and we want to talk about cronyism and corruption. I asked for a report of all their investments and all the stocks they're invested in. In 2010, They had stock in Correctional Corporation of America. No surprise, with the governor and his campaign donations. They have...
Wait. Back up and explain the connection for people who don't know what that connection is. Don't assume.
Correctional Corporation of America is a private organization running the prisons, one just south of Boise here. They have to go to the legislature, get a lot of approval, a lot of funding, and they've also been a big contributor, for Governor Otter's campaign and other campaigns. So the state is actually owning stock in this company, which they're making decisions over, in some cases, for appropriations. They had stock in a lot of tobacco companies. At the same time, Lawerence Wasden is suing in a class action suit the tobacco companies and winning a suit where the state's now getting funds from the tobacco settlement. We had stock in Diebold. Diebold makes voting machines. This is what's going on. They own stock in other timber companies. They're interfering with the free market system when they're selling timber and they're owning stock in other timber companies. These are the things that are going on. And as far as accountable, I know these guys would slap me too, and I know there's at least a dozen people in here that would slap me too. Jim would, Bob, Liz especially, and Judy, and these guys over here. So I think we'll all be held accountable. The big thing is they're taking away opportunity for our younger generation to start their own business if they have to already have a big financial statement just to start a business.
Hold on to the mic. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Big round of applause for all of our candidates here. We appreciate your guys' time. We want to move into the Q&A session. We've gone a little bit long. I guess that's typically what happens when you give the microphone to a bunch of candidates, right? Before it's over, we do want Lawerence Denney to be able to introduce himself. But I'm going to give this microphone here to my daughter, Marissa. If you have a question that you want to ask anybody here, raise your hand high. She'll take a look at you, and we want to get to everybody's question. We have time. So this gentleman here in the black, all we ask that you do is identify yourself, ask your question, and identify if you're asking it to anybody specifically or to the whole panel. We'll have them go ahead and answer. So Marissa, this gentleman right here.
Thank you, Randy Jackson, pastor of Student Ministries. I just had a question. I know a couple of you guys personally, by the way. I love you guys. I just wanted to ask a question. I'm of a firm opinion that we can change the laws, but if we don't change the hearts of the people, it's not going to matter much because they'll just change the laws right back once we're out of office. How do you intend to not only affect the laws, but the hearts of the people?
Why don't we start with you, Russ?
Fundamentally, what you're talking about is a cultural shift. You're talking about a societal shift. And so you lead on that front. Here's how you do it, or at least here's a way how to do it. Folks, in the last 10 years of the state Senate, I don't know how many thousands of bills came across my desk, but in almost every case, you can look at those bills and say it did one of two things. It either elevated the authority of the individual, the family, or it elevated the authority of the government. What we do, and a couple of colleagues and I have kind of nicknamed this the Idaho Doctrine. What you do is you structure and you lead and you direct an effort to push control from the government to the people. You do that for two reasons. Number one, I believe that was the intent of the divinely inspired founders of this nation. The people were to be the pinnacle of governance. The individual was. Government's to serve the people. The second reason you do that is because that is how the infrastructure gets built in place for that cultural shift. If the individual is in control and the family is in control, not the government, then that reliance, that self-dependence, that is the root of power. That is the root of empowerment. And so we create a leadership structure where the individual is in control, and we try to influence that cultural shift by shifting the control to the individual, not to the government.
Amen. We'll have John respond as well, and then we'll go to the next question.
Okay. In education, it's the mama bear looking out for her cubs. And I think it's more our responsibility to know the heart of the people and stay connected. And as we've gone through this process, there have been moms and dads from Idahoans for Local Education, Citizens Empowering Local Education, Idahoans Against Common Core, and what did they all have in common? Their concern for their own children. And as we respond to the heart of the people, then we stay connected.
Okay, a question right here.
My question is, and I don't know who to direct it to, Diego, but I don't know how many people here know that the lobbyists have a lounge in the State House. And to show you their arrogance, the door to the lobbyist lounge is a vault, a bank vault door, like we hold all the money. They're pretty arrogant. They hand out cards that say the third house. Some of them have watches that say the third house. I'd like to know what you're going to do to get the lobbyist lounge out of the State House.
Russ, we'll go back. Go ahead, Jim.
I might get in trouble here. I don't know. The lobbyists have as much right to free speech, I would say, as any of us in this room. Where are we? Why aren't we in the lobbyist room too? I guess would be my, because if you're going to start violating somebody else's rights because we're not showing up, and like I said, it's probably not the answer you want to hear. They're not paying for it.
It's a State House. No other State House that I know has a lobbyist lounge in the State House.
Really? I didn't know we were paying for it. I would say if the lobbyists want to have a lounge in there, they should have to pay for it. I would also say this, if we have a lobbyist lounge in there, go take it over too. Go take it over. But if they're not paying for it, then it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be there. They are paying for it? Russ is telling me they're paying for it. It's not something I was aware of. So, but wait a minute, you're going to, like I said, it's probably, maybe I'm going to differ on this one, because I do view free speech and the right for them to be able to go in there and lobby for those people. But then I also say this, we have just as much right to be in the lobbying room and show up and be in that room and do what? Take it over. Take over the room. You get the government you tolerate.
That's right.
Okay, that's what it's about. It's you get the government you tolerate. Go take over the room. Pay a buck, whatever. If they're charging for it, go take over the room. Make your presence known. And I know, Elizabeth, you're not agreeing with me on that. No, in my mind, here's what I would say. If I'm in the legislature, if I'm lieutenant governor, you do have a right in there, and I would make damn sure, pardon me, you have a right to be in the room. But you don't think that can happen? So we just kick. So then we just, if you guys can't be in there, then they can't be in there. It's got to work both ways. That's like I said. If you guys can't have a right, because you guys have every bunch's right to lobby. If the rules aren't going to be the same across the board, and I've said this when it comes to the free market. These targeted tax breaks, we do all these things. So a group over here gets this group over here doesn't get that. That's not right. The rules, the playing field has to be level. If it's not a level playing field, get rid of it. Kick them out, and they're gone. If they're not going to play by the same rules, I want us all the same advantage, equal access to opportunity, equal access to our legislatures, whatever it is. If they don't want to play by the same rules, kick them out. For me, it's that simple. It's got to be played by the same rules.
Good dialogue. We have a question over here. Young man in the blue.
Hi, Jim Thomas.
I want to know who's going to be effective enough to change the transparency on the medical costs that we have in this state. You know, we've got a monopoly with the hospitals and with Blue Cross Blue Shield people here. Very little choice, but we don't know what they charge. In a lot of other states, they have to make a list of what their charges are. What are you going to do to make them do that? We've had 3 people in our family who have gone bankrupt because of medical cost. They charge them more than they do the insurance companies, and it has to change.
Start with you, Russ.
This is all part of what I believe is necessary for that alternative path that I've talked about earlier tonight, that alternative path to the Affordable Care Act exchange. One of the components is that transparency. You know, when Diego was given one of the examples earlier tonight, I'm going to try to close this thing around, but I want to just share this thought. Yes, there was a tremendous lobby on behalf of the insurance companies to get the Affordable Care Act exchange put in place. Tremendous lobby, because it was a mandate for a product that they sell. It was a mandate, and there is a short-term windfall as a result of that. But think this through for a little bit. Once these exchanges are in place across the country, what are the insurance companies needed for? Think about that for a minute. I would argue that that is nothing more than an enabler for a single-payer, federally administrated healthcare system, which, by the way, is where this is going if we don't intervene. Okay, so I wanted to make that connection. But back to Bob's question, you put in place the statutory requirements for that transparency. You reinsert the free market into the healthcare system. That's where the healthcare savings account comes from. That's where the health membership component comes from, the direct pay. The transparency comes with that. Part of the real problem of the healthcare costs that we experience right now is because we don't know what we're paying. I've got personal family examples where you don't know what you're paying until you actually get the bill. That's one of those components that you have to insert in order to create that alternative that puts the power in the hands of the people again. So it's a very good point. It's good counsel, and that's one of the components we have to insert.
Great dialogue. Question right over here.
Thank you. I'm Merlin Smeckpepper from Meridian, Idaho, and I have two simple questions. You can do it with a yes or a no. Are you going to get Agenda 21 out of the state of Idaho? And the second question is, are you going to support vouchers for our school children?
Start with John really quick on that one.
Well, as state superintendent, I don't have a voice in regards to getting Agenda 21 out, but I do recognize it. The voucher system is a mixed bag of blessings. Where it has been implemented, such in the state of Louisiana, it has come tied with strings to government. The requirement has been for an IEP for those children that are going to participate in the voucher system, and also the demonstration that they'll pass the same set of assessment, tests, and standards. I think perhaps a tax credit, or even instead of a health savings account, something that would be an education savings account where that money actually belongs to the family and it is tax deferred, and they can use it over the course of the year to pay for those education expenses for homeschoolers, private or parochial. I'd need to investigate a little more in regards to the voucher system, but I do know that there are some concerns with it. I do need to give that caveat because I can't give a yes or no yet. I apologize.
And that's fair and acceptable. Jim, you wanted to respond to that. Quickly.
I'm very familiar with Agenda 21. I would fight not to have it, but I would say this. You need to offer an alternative to Agenda 21 and put Agenda 21 on the defense, and we need to play offense. We don't play offense. We need to protect private property rights. We need to stand for what we do, protecting individuals' rights. And when we do that, when we put forth that type of agenda, especially legislatively, that puts those type of pieces in places, then they've got a problem, not us. And we're playing defense all the time against this Agenda 21. Let's play offense. I'm not a big fan of vouchers because they come with strings. Let's do tax credits. Little different thing. So I support the concept, but tax credits come with no strings attached. You get a credit back. It's your money to go do with it. What you have brings true competition into the system.
Okay. A question over here.
Rod Beck. I have a question for three of you, for Russ, for Chris, for Lawerence. What gave me the rise to ask this question is you were talking, Diego, about the 10th Amendment.
Yep.
There is in place in Idaho law, now, and this is the first question, it's a two-part question. Were you aware that there is such a thing as a constitutional defense fund, that it had an original appropriation of $1 million? And has it been properly administered since its inception? And what can you do about it to properly administer it?
Why don't we start with you, Lawerence? Two-part. Did you know it existed? And then the second thing is, what are we going to do about it?
I absolutely do know that it exists. As Speaker of the House, I was one of the members that actually sat on the Constitutional Defense Council and made appropriations out from it. And no, it is not used appropriately. In fact, most of the money that has been appropriated out of the Constitutional Defense Fund went to cases that were lost by the Attorney General to pay the Attorney General fees. So, no, it has not been. No, it is to defend the Constitution and not to pay the Attorney General's court fees when he loses.
Yes, I'm aware it existed, and we have actually used that to get counsel because there was a lot of anxiety about taking that I'm talking about the Senate now. There was a lot of anxiety about taking the counsel from the Attorney General's office, which is another reason why I am hoping that we have a new Attorney General.
Speaking of new Attorney Generals, Chris.
Yeah, and you know, now I know that it existed, but I don't understand why I didn't know before when they needed good outside counsel, which is too bad, but, you know. Had a heck of a time getting paid, but anyway, no. I knew that it existed, and that has been a problem with respect to our legislature having to go outside because they don't trust the opinions that they get from the Attorney General's office, and that's because our Attorney General simply doesn't make good choices. He doesn't have good risk management on when to take cases and when not to. Case in point, up in northern Idaho in Clearwater County, the ITD contracted with a company called Debco, and Debco was to rebuild Washington Street in Orofino, and they did so, but the ITD designs were so screwed up that the project lasted several years longer than it was supposed to. So when they asked to get paid, ITD knew they had cost overruns, refused to pay them. And so what did Debco do? They needed the money. They had to sell off $4 million worth of equipment, lay off 178 employees while they waited for the state to pay them. They eventually got an expert hired by both parties to review the contracts and determine who was at fault. They said ITD was at fault. Now this expert hired by ITD and Debco together said ITD's at fault, pay Debco. They didn't. Instead, they went to a dispute review board inside the ITD. The dispute review board reviewed it and said, Debco's not at fault, pay Debco. They didn't. The Attorney General, through his deputy inside ITD, sued Debco. And last month, a judge not only dismissed the suit, but assessed the state of Idaho the attorney's fees for Debco to defend a frivolous lawsuit. So what did the Attorney General do? They appealed it to the Idaho Supreme Court, where it now sits. In the meantime, Clearwater County has lost a company that used to do $27 million worth of business, now is down to $7 million, and lost 178 jobs, as well as the incomes from those people who would have been distributed around Clearwater and Idaho counties and would have added to other jobs. That's frivolous. And that's the reason why we now have a constitutional defense fund. But when I'm Attorney General, we will make good choices. We won't get involved in frivolous lawsuits, and we won't need that fund.
Fantastic. Question right over here.
Okay. My name is Bill King, and all of these three main topics really affect me. I have a small business that I run. My insurance costs under the Affordable Care Act would have, had I followed it, would have cost me 221%. I'm a mechanical engineer. I have 8 children. All of them are girls except for 7, 3 of which of the non-girls are here with me tonight. And we homeschool. So Common Core really affects us as homeschoolers. It affects the public schools poorly, but it really affects homeschoolers because the only place I know of in the Constitution where it mentions education is the guarantee in the Idaho Constitution of parental responsibility for education. In fact, I'm going to paraphrase, but it says that education is a parental responsibility and the state has a responsibility to provide an alternative solution. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. 2 things, because protecting the public education system protects the home education system, which is successful for us. 2 things. How are you going to defend the Idaho Constitution with respect to the federal Constitution, because that's an agreement between the people of Idaho and the government and the federal government in Idaho, because it goes 3 ways. How are you going to defend that? And the other thing I have is for the controller also. If you were to go in, would you be willing to go in, review the expenses of federal oversight that is placed as a burden on the Idaho education system, and would you two be willing to reject federal dollars to retain Idaho control of the education system?
So go ahead, John, answer really quick, and then we'll have Todd answer really quick.
Okay, first of all, I appreciate the fact that you, as a homeschooling family, recognize the ominous portents for homeschoolers as well as public education as it concerns Common Core. Because obviously down the road, if we do not turn the tide on this, the ACT and the SATs were going to be rewritten in order to support Common Core standards. So it's going to impact your children's attempt to get into colleges and universities. Well, first of all, we do need to have a consortium of states who are willing to push back. And I will work towards that end. As you're aware, just last week, Washington State was slapped on the hand for failing to comply with teachers' evaluation systems that were tied to the assessment test. That was more coming from the teachers refusing to go along with that and speaking up and having a voice. But in fact, the rest of the states should have come to their defense and spoken up. And we're going to need to see more of that as far as building consensus amongst the states. What was the second part to your question?
Second.
I'm loud enough. I think you can all hear me.
We need you to use a microphone.
Do I need a microphone?
Yeah, you use a microphone for the video. So the second part, go ahead.
The second
quickly.
part was, so I'm a small business owner. I understand the cost of overhead. I think that the cost of overhead from federal programs and the mandates that go there are probably causing huge costs, huge expenses in our education system. If we were to eliminate those things and rid ourselves of federal mandates, at the same time ridding ourselves of federal dollars, we would be able to drop our overhead and apply more of those dollars to education, to public education. Would you and the controller essentially be willing to go in, review that, come up with a business-like solution to education, and rid ourselves of those federal dollars? The reason they were able to slap the state of Washington basically is because they've got them handcuffed for federal dollars. If we don't have that handcuff, then we are free to do.
First of all, Title I funds belong to you and to me. Those are our taxpayer funds going to the federal government, and we're only getting a small portion of those back to the states. So, yes, I am willing to start weaning the state of Idaho off of dependency from federal grants in order to support education. NCLB, unfortunately, is the law of the land. And so it's going to take the help of the Attorney General, and other attorney generals around the states to address this issue, to repeal it, based on the fact that the federal government, the U.S. Department of Education, have in fact stepped outside of their charter with all of these mandates and made it egregious for the states. I believe we have a legal case to do that. Hopefully Mr. Troupis can support that position.
Fantastic. You know, for the sake of time, we're going to just take 2 more quick questions, and we're looking for relatively quick questions. Todd's going to answer that, and then we're going to have all these gentlemen give their closing statement, and we'll wrap up. So, Todd, if you could just answer this question again really quick.
Yeah, as a state controller, it's we're paying the bills and preparing the financial statements for the state. It's up to the legislature. They handle appropriations, and they're in charge of accepting the money, I guess. And back in the 80s, they took the auditing services away from the state controller's office. So we're not allowed to go in and audit departments. So that's a big reason why I'm pushing the transparency, because it's, you have an issue with the schooling, and you're going to be right up on this, and you can bring a lot of information, and we can go in and review. There's nothing holding us back from doing that, and then putting forth a plan to be advocating to the legislature on the funding. Same goes with all the other departments. So that's the big part of transparency, is everybody else can really get engaged in this, and we can push things forward.
Fantastic. So we had a question right here, and this
Hey,
question
my
right
name
here.
is Elijah King, and I'm a homeschooler, and I think just a question for everybody. Who's heard of Executive Order 13603? If you have, please raise your hand.
Just need to get to the question real fast, son.
Yeah. Executive Order 13603, in effect, allows the executive government to have people work without pay. It is the exact same thing which the Civil War was about. States' rights. And I am completely against the executive government coming in with executive orders and taking away our freedom. And I would like to ask the government, the people here, how would you overturn these executive orders?
If I go to Chris really quick, I don't know, Chris, if you want to respond to that. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, we need to repeal something like that. If you're working, you deserve to be paid for work. And we have some laws here in the state not allowing kids to work in some of the industries until they're a certain age. I'm a firm advocate that kids need to start working at a very young age and learn some trades, learn some skills. So they have these skills. Not everybody's meant to cut out and to go to college. We're going to be short on workforce construction jobs in the timber industry, agriculture job, labor force real soon.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that executive order, but I'll tell you this much. You don't have an obligation to work for nothing under any executive order. That's referred to as involuntary servitude, and we have a constitutional amendment that abolished that. So to the extent there would be an executive order that actually had that effect, I think it would be clearly unconstitutional. And if somebody tried to enforce it in the state of Idaho, I'd come to your defense.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, right here, you got the last question for the night.
All right, hello, my name is David Dick, and I'm actually a candidate for township committee person here in 2011. But I also have dealt with cronyism. I ran for a position back in my hometown, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, and actually had an influential gentleman by the name of August Bush IV try to fund my campaign, which I promptly denied because I wasn't accepting any funds. But to get away from that, my question is, I graduated from the University of Montana in 2008 at the top of my class. I had a lot of companies, federal, state agencies offering me positions. I was offered graduate school at the University of Montana, which I promptly accepted. In 2010, the federal regulations came out with a regulation which state governments promptly followed, which gave special considerations to the status of certain individuals for certain positions within federal or state agencies. I wanted to know what you would do to help graduates like myself find positions within the state government, federal government, because I'm going on 4 years now, and I'm still trying to get a job. I've had thousands of resumes out there, and I'm still in limbo. So trying to figure out what you would think about the status requirements that states and the federal government has put in place.
We'll come to Chris and Jim on this one, being more like an executive question here. So the question is, what would they do to help consolidate the question in just one quick statement?
Getting rid of a status requirement for employment.
Okay. Actually, let's start with you, Chris, since this is a legal question.
It seems to me that what I'm familiar with now, I haven't kept up with the latest developments in the law, but I know there have been recent cases. In fact, Jim was just mentioning to me one in Michigan, and although I've heard of it, I haven't seen it particularly. But what I understand, you cannot create special classes of people and discriminate against anyone else in the provision of a government job. And that I believe is what that case stood for. So I think that the law is moving in that direction without knowing the specifics of what the benefit is offered or what the status is. I couldn't tell you what the legal position would be. But I know that as Attorney General, I would review every law to make sure there isn't any invidious discrimination or special benefits provided to a person based on a particular group or status. But I can't tell you, I can't speak to the specifics since I haven't looked at that specific area of the law. So.
That's fair enough. We'll leave it at that. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your time. We're going to have each of these gentlemen give us a 60-second closing statement. We appreciate you for staying with us here long. And of course, I'm sure they'll hang out a little bit. If you have any other questions, you want to come and ask them directly. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for caring enough to learn. Well, my sincere desire for each one of you here is to take what you've learned from these gentlemen and share it, good, bad, or ugly. Share it with some other people. If everybody here just shared it with at least one neighbor, that would make the difference. So we want to start from this end with Todd. Take this microphone. 60 seconds apiece, gentlemen. Give us your closing statement.
Well, I'm Todd Hatfield again, running for the Idaho State Controller. Our land board, the State Controller is one of the 5 voting members on the land board. They're about to bank to about $200 million, and their intention is to invest this in more businesses and commercial properties in direct competition. We have to stop this. We got the current leadership pretends we don't have debt. That has to stop too. So we need to take responsibility for our actions, and this, myself and these guys up here, I'm convinced they're all going to do it too. Please visit my website, toddhatfield.com. You'll get to know a lot more about me by our position papers on there, and I appreciate your support on May 20th. Thank you.
All right.
And my name's Chris Troupis. I have a website too, troupisforidaho.com. And, I've spoken enough. I'm not a career politician. I've never served in public office. It is not my intention to become a career politician. As I said, the reason that I'm trying to get to this office is to make a difference as a people's advocate, as an advocate for you, and to defend your rights and to reassert the balance that is required between the people and their government. Idaho needs to be a sovereign state, economically, and with our core values preserved and protected for our children. That's what I intend to do, and I think that we can inspire a generation, inspire a country. And I hope you support me in the upcoming May 20 election. Chris Troupis for Attorney General.
All right.
My name is John Eynon, and I am running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Throughout this campaign, I have had to scratch my head. It's been incredulous that my 3 opponents find absolutely no concerns with Common Core. Their messages are so similar, you can say they're common to the core. I do believe in restoring local control of our schools and respecting parental rights. And finally, common sense, not Common Core. Please support Eynon for Education.
Well, I've spent 12 years fighting on this public lands issue, the last 3 as a county commissioner, and they said you couldn't do the things that I want to do as a county commissioner. I think we've accomplished a lot. I'd like to be your lieutenant governor, be able to go do the same things, be able to talk to other legislatures, other governors, other lieutenant governors, and let them know why this is so important to them and how this benefits the entire country. I believe you get a little more clout when you're lieutenant governor and pick up the phone than you do as a county commissioner. I enjoy fighting for this state, and guys, I didn't pick the fight, but I like to fight. My name is Jim Chmelik, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor, and I appreciate your vote May 20th.
Well, my name is Lawerence Denney, and I'm running for Secretary of State. First of all, thank you, Diego, for letting me come in and crash the party.
Yeah.
I'll be here a little bit late. You know, my website is denneyforidaho.com, and I want you to go there and learn more about me, because I don't want to talk about myself right here tonight. I want to tell you a little bit about this group up here.
Go ahead.
And I want to tell you that we all came to the decision to run independently after much prayer and soul searching, and I was the first one to do that. And you know, the establishment has called us the radical right, the rebels, the Sons of Liberty, the Liberty Group, and and I'm going to make a prediction a week from tomorrow that we're going to be called the Men of Destiny.
Well, folks, basically I'm here for 2 reasons. The first reason is to offer a reference. The second reason is to apply for a job. So let me offer the reference first. I support Lawerence Denney. I support Jim Chmelik. I support John Eynon. I support Chris Troupis. I support Todd Hatfield. I support Judy Boyle. I support Howard Rynearson. I support Diego Rodriguez. And I think I saw John Vanderwada here for a little while. I support John Vanderwada. I support Raul Labrador. Folks, we've done the best we can to communicate tonight where we stand and why we're standing here. I ask you to ask yourself, are you better off today than you were 8 years ago? If you're like most people in the state of Idaho, the answer to that question is no. To that end, I would ask you to support those on this panel, the people that I mentioned. My name is Russ Fulcher. I ask for your vote on May 20th.
Appreciate that, Russ. If we can get all you guys to stand, if you don't mind. Yeah. By God's grace, I hope and pray that I stand here before you with the next set of constitutional officers for the state of Idaho. Let's hear it for these gentlemen here. Come on to the front, gentlemen. Some people want to get some pictures of you. This might be a destiny-type picture.
I'm having District 15 for Diego on Wednesday. I'm the back.
Thanks again, everybody. We appreciate your time. You can be dismissed. And if you want to get any additional information from these gentlemen, please see them before they leave. Take care and God bless you.
Thank you.